All right. Hey, thanks for joining us today. My name is Rob Aubrey. I'm your host of Productive Agent Podcast. And today our guest is Bill Hepting. And Bill is a home inspector. Bill's been a home inspector since 2005. And prior to being a home inspector, Bill is a general contractor specializing in interior remodeling for 10 years. So the value of being an interior remodeler means he took homes apart and put them back together. And that is an invaluable experience, bringing it into the home inspection world. So, so say hello to Bill, right? Bill, say hi to everybody.
Hi, Robin. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, no problem. So, Bill, I've been doing business with Bill since, I don't know, 2005, 2006, maybe,
Yeah.
so I've been, Bill and I have known each other quite some time. We become friends, and I always share, when I would refer him to buyers, I said, we're friends. I said, I'm not referring you him because he's my friend. We became friends because we worked together for so long. And so my working together with him is, obviously I wouldn't continue to work with him if I thought he didn't know what he was doing. But anyway, I just wanted to have a conversation today about just different things in the inspection world, like what are some of the most common problems? What are some of the myths? I always like to ask the myths because there's so much, misinformation out there. And so let's start off with common stuff, Bill. I mean, what do you think? What would you say are some of the more common things you see on inspections that are, problems or need to be corrected, let's say? Because to me, it was always never mattered what it was. It just mattered how much it cost.
Yeah. And who's going to pay for it?
Right. I mean, when you're buying a $300,000, $400,000 home and it's $100 worth of repairs, I mean, that's like in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't mean much.
Right.
So what would you say some of the most common problems are?
I think one of the most common things is usually in the electrical system.
Okay.
I mean, almost always people double tap breakers. You can only have one wire per breaker, period.
Right. So one wire per break. So double tap is putting two wires in
one, right.
But it's not really the load of electricity that's the problem, right?
Right. It's most breakers can only hold one wire. And so what you worry about is when it screws down, it might tighten up on one wire and not quite so tight on the other wire, and you start getting a little bit of an arcing.
I see.
Burning the wire.
So it's not so much the load,
Right.
because if it has too much load, the breaker just breaks. Doesn't matter.
Correct. Right.
So it's the way the two wires are put in there that it's not designed for. So that can create an arcing problem.
Right.
So, and then that's a simple fix though, isn't it?
No, that's a real easy fix. Yeah. Some electricians just pigtail one wire into it if the load's not too bad. Probably the correct way to, and that's okay. Probably the correct way to do it is just add another breaker. And they can take a single breaker and make it a double breaker. It takes up the same amount of space. Pretty simple fix.
If you know what you're doing, right?
If you know what you're doing, yeah.
Right.
Or you like to get shocked. I mean, whichever you prefer.
Right. Yeah. So my electrician's name is Sparky. It's funny when I met Sparky, I was on a job. I was redoing a house, and I called my buddy. I said, "Hey, I need an electrician." He sent the guy over. And it was funny. I'm talking to the guy all day, and it was like, I don't know, late at night, 8, 9 o'clock at night. I worked there all day and night, and then I was driving home, and it just like dawned on me that his nickname was Sparky, and it just cracked. Yeah. I mean, it was like I was just so focused on working that it wasn't until I started relaxing that I realized what his nickname was, and that was actually pretty funny. So, but no, I've known Sparky since I bought that house in 1996.
Yeah.
That's how long.
Pretty good dude too. So.
Oh yeah, Sparky's a good guy. You know. So pigtail, right? If I understand it correctly, is you take the two wires instead of putting them into the breaker, you just take the two wires, and then you take a third wire, and you just take one end and put the two wires together, right? I get it.
Right.
And then you tie them up real nice and tight, and then you just take the one wire and stick it in the breaker. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right. Which will work just fine as long as there's not too much load on those wires and not doubling up the load, But,
right. The load that's a separate issue.
Right. That's a totally separate issue. Correct. Right.
So it's not that big a deal.
No, no, it's really not that big a deal. Another thing you want to make sure you watch out for though too is if the electrician hasn't done your electrical work in the box, is matching up your wires to the right size breaker.
I see.
So
Tell me more about that.
So let's just say like you got a 15 amp breaker, which is what most lights and everything run off. Outlets usually run off a 20 amp, but
Right.
like a 15 amp breaker can only take a 14 gauge wire, which is a pretty thin wire.
Right.
So you can't take a 14 gauge wire and put it on a 20 amp breaker because the wire will burn up. The wire is smaller than the breaker, so the wire will burn up before the breaker ever trips.
Oh, I see.
Now you can do it the other way. You can have a thicker wire on a 15 amp because the breaker's the key. I mean, you want that breaker to trip if it gets too hot. You just want it to trip, not fry the wire.
Right, not fry the wire, because that could actually start a fire then, right? Frying the wire.
Absolutely, it can. I almost had that happen to my house about a month ago.
Excuse me.
My wife blew the GFCI breaker blow drying her hair, and she couldn't reset it because the breaker the outlet was so hot. So when I took it apart, the wire was melted all in there. When I looked at it, it's only a little 14 gauge wire, but they had a 20 amp GFCI breaker on there. So the GFCI tripped and it literally melted the wire to the outlet.
So you either have to get a thicker wire or a lower amperage, right?
A lower amperage outlet, yes.
Right.
Yeah, because again, that's what we were just talking about.
Yeah, the breaker's not going to break.
Yeah, they're going to fry the wire before it ever trips the breaker, which basically a GFCI is kind of pretty much an outlet with a breaker built in, and they're very, very sensitive. They're required around water, exteriors, garages, things like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if something happens, they trip fast. Right.
Well, that's what you want.
Yeah. In case your wife's taking a bath and you walk in there with a toaster and throw it in the
Right. She's safe.
I mean, I'm sure that's probably where they all came from, because I mean, back when I was younger, you used to hear about that kind of stuff all the time, or dropping a blow dryer in there,
right?
Dropping a
curling iron, whatever.
So so that's the whole idea. So they'll trip real fast, so you don't get electrocuted. So
right.
Yeah, that's the idea. Another issue we always run into is usually in plumbing. Everybody thinks they can do their own plumbing, but you see the P traps underneath the sink and stuff, and they've got black tape wrapped around it.
Yeah,
they've got a whole tube of silicone souping everything up. When really all it probably took was just a little 50-cent washer to fix it.
Got it. Yeah, just unscrew it, replace the seal, put it back, make sure it's straight. You're not stripping anything.
Yeah. See that kind of stuff. See that stuff quite often.
That's funny. Yeah. So they went and bought an $8 tube of silicone where they could have just gotten a 50-cent washer.
A little washer. Yeah. There's just a little neoprene washer that goes in there. It's not a big deal. But, you see that stuff all the time. You see, almost like stepping over dollars to get the dimes. Some thing. Kind of crazy.
No. Well, and today with YouTube, videos, gosh, if you can't fix little minor stuff like that, what's wrong with you?
Well, and if you're going to be a homeowner, you're going to want to learn how to do a few of these little things, because there's always something. It never stops.
Either that or get out that credit card, right?
Oh yeah, or pay somebody, $80 an hour to come over and fix a 50-cent washer.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely need to learn how to do a few of these things yourself, for sure.
Yeah, I always say it's like when you buy a home, it's like walking into Home Depot is like Norm walking into Cheers. Everybody knows them. Norm.
Yeah. You usually go to Home Depot more often than you go in the grocery store.
Yeah. When the guys at Home Depot know you by name and they know your wife and kids and all that. Yeah, that's maybe trying to buy new construction.
Yeah. But those are probably the two most serious, because water can do a lot of damage in a very short amount of time, and of course electrical can start a fire. So those are probably two of the most important.
Right, water and electric, right?
Right, exactly.
So excuse me. So like water leaks are obviously a problem, but then like water coming from the outside, what's the most common prevention for that?
Well, one for sure, you want to have rain gutters that are clean and cleared and actually slope the right direction. And you want to make sure those downspouts, you want to get extensions on those things. Get that water away from your house. Because if it might take years to slowly make its way to one of your window wells. And once it does, it's like Niagara Falls, man. That water just
Right.
comes in there, just fills it up, and then now you got a problem. So divert that water away from your house.
That's the
And
key, right?
preferably not over to your neighbors because they kind of frown on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. They don't like that.
But get it out on your lawn. Use that water out on your lawn. Those little 4-inch, 3-inch plastic pipes that they get.
Yeah, they're like accordion.
I mean, they come in like 10. Yeah, they're like 10 feet long.
Right.
On the get it on the end of your downspout where it curves, and just run that thing out on your lawn, or bury it in your lawn and get a little pop-up thing on the bottom, so you don't have to move it every time you mow the lawn. But get that water away from your house. Whew.
Yeah, that's the key, because I mean, houses aren't waterproof. I mean, in other words, if you dunk a house in a pool, it's going to leak like a sieve.
Right.
The
And
key
then
is
and honestly, water does what it does. I mean, it'll sit
Right.
up there against your foundation until it finds a way in, or finds
Right,
a way
it's just
to go
gonna
down
keep
farther.
so
It'll
it
just
either
keep
dries
going
out or
down,
it figures a way in.
down. Right, exactly. And especially on older homes. I mean, before they backfill after they do the foundations and footings and stuff, they waterproof the outside. But if they miss a little spot, I mean, all it takes is the size of an eraser.
Right.
It don't take much for water to get in there. Once it does, it does what it
Yeah,
does.
once it beats a path, then it's not going to path anywhere else. It's just going to keep going in down that same vein and into the same hole.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so grading obviously is important to keeping
Grading's
the
always
house dry.
important too. And also sprinklers. Don't ever have sprinklers spraying up against your house. Put them
Right.
up against your house, spraying away from your house. Don't let it hit your
Right.
house.
Right.
Those kind of things are going to save you a lot of headache down the road,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, just have your sprinklers pointing away, right?
Yep, away from the house. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So grading, and then so if you already have grading that's off a little bit going the wrong way, I mean, is there a simple solution to that, or?
You mean as far as the grading up against your house and having a low
Yeah,
spot?
like if it's pouring down a little bit, I mean, because it only has to slant a hair,
Yeah. I mean, you fill it up with some dirt, or go down and buy a couple bags of dirt or whatever, and just get it build up to where it's at least sloping a little bit. They prefer what we used to have to do in the construction has to slope 2%. They just want to slope 2% away from your house. Now, also when you have a new house, you're going to get settling that first year or two.
Right.
A lot of that because they don't compact up against your house because they're worried about hurting the foundation when it's raw, new green concrete. So they're not going to compact up against there. So I would put some hose on there, water it, and let the snow do what it does. Don't overwater, but just try to get it compacted stuff. Build it up with more dirt, compact it a little bit more, get a good nice slope away from your house.
Got it. Yeah, that'll work.
Oh yeah, it'll save you a lot of headache down the road too.
Right, because if you get water in, next thing you know, you got mold. You got to tear out drywall, replace floor covering,
carpeting, padding. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Then not to mention all the inconvenience. Yeah, so it's a lot easier. It's a lot cheaper to get dirt, huh?
Oh, a lot cheaper. I do a little elbow work. I gather, put a little dirt down there, build some flower beds or something. Do something up against your house.
Right. Don't plant trees against the house either, right?
Yeah, don't plant trees against the house, man. And remember, trees grow.
And the roots go somewhere.
Yeah, they put these things out. Oh, it's a cute little twig and everything. 20
right.
Years later,
It's just big,
this
right?
massive tree.
You're right.
Oh, banging up against your rain gutters and stuff, and hitting your house, and man.
Right.
Yeah, or over the top of your water line, or over the top of your sewer line, even worse.
Right.
It might take 20, 30, 40 years, but those roots are going somewhere. If we have a dry season, those roots are looking for water. And if they can find it in your sewer pipe, you'll be replacing that sewer pipe.
Right. So yeah, if you have trees out on the parking strip somewhere, then you might, that's like it's an indication you might have a drain problem, right?
Oh, the trees out you mean just trees just
out by the street? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, if you have bigger trees, old trees out by the street.
Yeah, and then you'll be cutting them, trimming them every once in a while, and all that kind of stuff. But cities like to have a little vegetation out on that park strip, so they like to have a little something. I'm just not so sure trees, because now all of a sudden you got, like I say, another 20 years from now, those roots are going to be ripping that sidewalk
up. Yeah,
sidewalk, and it's all cockeyed and stuff.
Yeah, my neighborhood was built in the 70s, and when I walk, I mean, it's like, you got to be looking down the whole time.
You better watch.
The sidewalks are like this,
breaking your ankle.
Yeah, there's all kinds of crooked sidewalks, from roots, and they come and grind them to try to, to kind of flatten the
It's
edges out a little bit.
the cheap way of doing it instead of tearing it out and you're doing it right.
Well, the city will run around and do that,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so, I mean, it's just because they're trip hazards. I mean, it's still a trip hazard, but not quite as much. Well, and it's
Right.
like the city doesn't want to come around and tell everybody you got to tear out your tree and replace all the sidewalks. I mean, they're like, no, we're not going to do that.
Well, because more than likely they were the ones that told you had to put them in. So
No, not actually in Cottonwood
they
Heights.
like a little vegetation out there because I've been trying to do a little bit
Right.
of mine too, and they just sound like I can do 70%. They want 30% vegetation or something. So it's like whatever.
No, Cottonwood Heights didn't become a city till 2005. So
good.
Yeah. I was actually here. It's funny. I grew up in the oldest city, Philadelphia, and then the idea of seeing a city born, I was like, that just never even dawned on me, So I was living in Cottonwood Heights 2004, and then we voted to incorporate as a city. I'm like, this is pretty cool,
Yeah, you lived in Philadelphia, whereas the city has been a city for a couple hundred years.
Yeah, well, since the 1600s,
Yeah.
I mean, the Philadelphia, that's where, people say, you have an accent. I go, I don't have an accent. I said, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. You guys got accents.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, it's the original. We're the original OGs, man.
Oh, yeah.
So, excuse me. So, yeah, that's interesting stuff, And so,
and it's real helpful for down the road. I mean, people don't think about right now. They just kind of do things that look nice, but think about what's going to happen 20, 30 years down the road.
Right.
A beautiful little tree you planted when your girl was a baby.
Right.
It's going to be 30 years old one day and
and you got a giant oak
tree.
If
you get too close to it, I mean, there certainly is issue. You can certainly damage a foundation with tree roots if the tree's big enough.
Right. Yeah, the roots get big enough and they start working again. And like you said, they're chasing water and they're creating, that root system is creating kind of like veins for water to run through.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what would you say are some of the myths, or the misconceptions in, I know we talked briefly about, infrared, infrared is, the rage, it's one of the latest and greatest rages.
Yeah. And that's a good tool. It's just one of the tools they should be using, with it. But you got to remember too, when we do inspections, just remember for sure that it's a visual inspection.
Right.
If we can't see
You're not opening up a wall. Right.
Yeah. And most time we don't move furniture. I mean, I move a couch here and there to check an outlet or check the baseboard to see if there's water stuff. But as a general rule, you're not moving people's pianos and dressers and stuff out of the way to try to get. So you never know what's behind there.
Right.
You try to see everything you can. You climb up in the attic. You get up on the roof. You do crawl spaces. You just try to get anywhere and everywhere you can to try to tell the buyers as much information as you can, so they can make a logical decision on purchasing probably one of the largest investments they'll ever make.
Right.
Got to give them all the information you possibly can, no matter how big, how small, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
But let's back to infrared. I mean, infrared is a thermal imaging, so it doesn't necessarily tell you that there's a water leak. It tells you that there is a temperature variation.
Right.
Okay?
So that could be anything.
It could be anything. It could be missing insulation. It could be a lot of things. So if you're going to have a thermal guy come and do it, get one that has a lot of experience and a good, expensive camera, and knows how to read it, because he's got to get pictures. He's got to be able to determine if that's water or air.
Right.
So I mean,
because water and air, they look the same.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 different times when I was a contractor. I tore out walls that the thermal engineering guy said there was a leak behind there and stuff. You tear it out and there's a water pipe, but it's not leaking. It's just a water pipe.
Right. The water pipe's cold.
It's cold. Yeah.
Colder than the air.
So you've got to wait and show the homeowner, show everybody, to make sure everybody's happy, and then
put it back together.
Put the drywall back together and mud it and tape it, paint it, and put baseboards back in. And it's going to be quite a.
And then smack the other guy upside the head.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, a visual inspection, the number one thing we are looking for is any kind of water issue. Peeling paint, bubbling paint, water
Right.
stains on baseboards,
Softwood,
water,
soft
yeah,
floors, you know?
yeah, window sills, the top
Right.
and bottom, all the way around windows. I mean, you're looking for any kind of water intrusion whatsoever, first and foremost. And infrared works okay with that. I prefer personally, I use a moisture meter because
Right.
moisture meter picks up moisture. I mean, if it's wet, it picks it
It's
up.
right.
It's just cut and dried. It's a lot simpler. It's black and white, you know.
Right.
So, and when people think you can actually see behind the walls, it's like, well, you really can't see behind the walls. You can see any temperature variations behind the wall, but you
Right.
can't, you can't really, you don't know. It doesn't pick up mold unless it's really wet. It's not going to pick up mold or anything like that behind the wall.
Right.
The only way to find out for sure is tear the drywall out. So,
Right.
but,
So a moisture meter actually, so that's like just little pins and, just like two little pins or something, right?
yeah, there's two of them on the same thing. There's two pins on the end, and then two little like needle things that you can stick in there.
Right.
The thing you plug in a probe. I know a lot of stucco guys, if they're having checking out some stucco that might be water
Right.
damaged, they'll drill little holes and stick their probe in there, and then to see if they can pick up any moisture that way. So yeah, there's
Right.
different. Yeah, but the little things the poor little things they're not very big. They're only about 8 inches long, and they're spindly little buggers, but they are invaluable.
Right.
Invaluable. So that's always so.
And I remember talking to a stucco contractor one time. He says, "You want me to give you the lesson?" I'm like, "Yeah." So, I mean, he spent like an hour walking me around the house. I mean, he knew his stuff. He's like, "Yeah, it was colder when they did this section than when they did that section." I'm like, "Yeah." And as and I never would have picked it up, but as he pointed it out, I start to see it. But he was showing me that the biggest mistake people make all the time is they caulk those little things around the window where what do they call them, weeps or something like that?
Well, yeah, weep holes at the bottom of every window is a little weep hole, and that's so if water gets in between there somewhere, it's got a way to get out.
It comes out, and people caulk them up.
Yeah, they do. They caulk those up, and stucco is the same way. When you have stucco, I mean, what we look at when we see stucco, we see the color code. That's actually the final coat. Behind there you got the wood that they frame the house with and sheeted
Right.
it, and they've got some
Then they
kind
got
of
the paper.
waterproofing. Yeah,
Right.
then they put wire up there, which I always call chicken wire. The
Right.
wire
Right.
they put
Oh,
up
yeah,
there
the
and
wire.
everything else.
Right.
Right. Then you put the stucco, then you put the color code. So I got 3 or 4 layers of things on the stucco.
Right.
And they had a pretty big issue with them from like 2005. I think it was like 2000 or 1995 to 2005. They were when they first brought stucco into Utah because it's a California product.
Right.
They were really having issues with it, but now
They've
their
perfected
codes
the
have changed
climate.
so much. Yeah, they've changed it so much. I mean, now before you can even stucco, after they put that wire up there, they have to caulk every single staple that they used, and it has to be inspected by the senior inspector before they'll let them
Wow.
before they let them put stucco in. Yeah, then you have to have expansion joints every 144 square feet. You have to
Right.
have flashing. I mean, they've changed a lot, but some of these older houses and stuff like that just have some stucco issues.
Yeah. The other thing the guys, stucco guys showed me was, he says, you see a lot of cracks. He says, when the weather's colder, the cracks, because it contracts. And
Yeah,
so he says, but as soon as it warms up, everything expands, and you don't see the cracks anymore.
yeah, and the way they've always taught us too is if you've got a crack in there that you can stick a dime in, about the thickness of a dime, then
Right.
it's probably too big. But you're going to have little hairline cracks in it, stress cracks in it all the time because it's kind of a concrete product, and that's just the way
Right. That's just the way it is. Right.
But if it's
So,
done right, stucco's fine.
right.
If
The
it's
other
not,
thing he showed me was they always caulked around the bottom, and it's the same thing. He says stucco's a system. He said if moisture goes in, it's got to go down, and it's got to have a way out, like the weep holes in the
right,
window.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So they usually put flashing in that. I mean, they sometimes you still see it, sometimes you don't. And you don't necessarily like half of the house will be stucco, the other half's going to be brick or stone or something like that. You don't necessarily. I mean, nowadays they put flashing between those two.
Right.
But years ago they used to not put it there, but they put flashing at the bottom, so the water could come out and not maybe go out between that seam. It'll all the way down to the bottom and then come out. So as
Right.
long as you got some flashing, as long as you got a way for water to get out of there, because if
Right.
it doesn't, it's going to sit in there until it finds a way into your house. I mean, that's just how
It's going to
it is.
go somewhere. It's either going in
It's
or
going to
out.
go somewhere.
Right.
That's for
And
sure.
because, this side's stucco, which is concrete type, the other way's wood. So it's going to, now you got termites,
Yeah, and mold and all
Yeah,
kinds of
right.
water damage and drywall and carpet. There we go again with water.
Right.
Water could cause a lot of damage, man,
Well,
in
it
a short amount of time. Very
causes
short.
canyons.
Yeah, after a couple of million years,
Right.
but the idea is the same. I mean, the
Right.
same like we were talking about is getting the water away from your house. I mean, I lived in a house I bought out in Riverton, and I never had a problem with it for 5 years. Then all of a sudden, my daughter called me one day, and the window well's full of water. Well, the water just sat out there in a little pool, and until it found its little way into the window well, and once it did, it was literally just,
It
and
was
it
just
filled
a
the window
fish
well up.
tank.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I
literally a
would have
fish,
just,
literally.
I would have just drew fish in there and said, I bought you a fish tank, honey.
You might as well, man. Yeah, good job. Built in, built in, built
Yeah.
into the wall.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what
But
other things like, like anything else? I mean, like,
well,
like roofs. What about roofs? I mean, people shingle over top of shingles. I mean,
yeah, and some roofers will put a second layer. You can have 2 layers of shingles on a roof. That's
right.
what they say, because you got to worry about the weight of the shingles,
Right.
and
Then 2 foot of
trusses
snow.
yeah, and the weight of everything. So generally speaking, you can only put 2 layers, and some roofers won't do that because one, people got to realize that shingles are made to be out in the sun.
Right.
The part we look at and we see that's made to be up there. Where you start to getting earlier deterioration is not having enough ventilation in the attic, and it basically cooks it from the bottom up.
Right.
And then sometimes you're going to have some manufacturer defects every once in a while.
Right. So if you have a layer of shingle and then you put another one on top, so the underneath shingle is getting hot and actually baking the other shingle from the bottom, right?
Right.
Plus
Yeah,
the attic.
those attics do get hot, believe me.
Oh yeah.
Climbing up in them bad boys at 100 degrees outside. It's
Yeah,
150, 150, 160 degrees up there, man. It's hot.
Come out. Yeah.
And,
Come down 10 pounds lighter.
without the proper ventilation, that's why they have gable vents and they have roof vents and
right, the squirrel cages, whatever they call them.
vents and stuff like that. I want that air flowing and getting the heat out of there as best you can. Not a huge fan of attic fans myself, but that's just me.
You're saying you're not a huge fan of them?
Yeah, not a huge fan of attic fans. I mean, unless you keep an eye on them every once in a while, stuff like that, because they'll be on all the time. They run off a thermostat,
right?
And they work and they're fine. You just got to keep an eye on them. I mean, they start to go out and they start to hear squealing and noising and bearings and everything else going on. You want to get that fixed before it gets too hot and causes a fire too. So,
right. Yeah. So if you have a fan, I mean, because like our houses in the summertime, I mean, it cools off at night, but if you can get that air in the attic cooled out of there, I mean, it's easier to cool your house off.
Yeah, and again, that's the whole purpose of it. And that's just again my own personal opinion is I'd rather have one that maybe wasn't motorized. Just get one of those ones that are like the wind.
The squirrel cages on the roof, right?
Yeah, right. If you're going to put some, and people do that all the time when they're converting their house from central air from a
swampy
cooler. Yeah,
right, from a swamp to central
air. They take that out and it's like, oh hey, we got this ductwork up here. Let's put a fan in here. And that's what they do. Which is fine as long as you keep an eye on it. Change it.
Well, my idea of a fan is out the sides, not up the top.
Yeah. Yep. But then that's the whole idea is to try to get the proper ventilation up in the attic,
right?
To try to keep the shingles from cooking.
Well, even if you had a little bit of moisture going in there, it's like you said, nothing's waterproof. If you had fans up there, the wood's not going to rot. It's just going to dry. It'll dry before it can rot.
Right. I had a guy come over and look at mine one time, and he started looking at the wood, the trusses up there and stuff. And he go, oh, you can see where it's the sap coming out of it, so it's gotten too hot up here and stuff. You don't have enough ventilation. It's like, well, that's something I learned. I mean,
right. So sap coming out of the wood.
Yeah, that's what he said. Of course, they were trying to sell me a $25,000 roof, but
right. Well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, you heat the wood up, it starts like sweating.
Yeah.
The wood's sweating.
Yeah, it did make sense, but I'd never heard that before until this guy was trying to give me 20 grand.
So he's either smart or a hell of a salesman.
Exactly. And that brings me to another point about getting home inspections. I mean, they are. We have no motive. We might be referred to by an agent or whatever, but we work for the home buyer.
Right.
And our
And you get
job is to
paid
give them
regardless of the deal
right,
closes.
we're trying to give them an unbiased opinion of the defects that we find in their house. I mean, that's the
Right.
whole life, you know. And every once in a while you get an agent that gets mad because you tell them, oh, why'd you have to tell them to go caulk the showers? Like, well, have you ever tore a shower out?
Right.
You know, if an $8 tube of caulk could save you from ripping that wall out here in 10 years and having
Right.
a real mess to clean up, you know. But just small things like that. It's been sometimes a lot of a storm inspector would just give recommendations. I mean, it's not like there's anything wrong with it or anything. We just got recommendations to try to save you
Right.
some down the road, you know. So,
Well, and I've seen home inspectors tell a buyer, well, you should probably negotiate with the seller. And I'm like, well, dude, I'm the agent here, you know?
yeah, I don't want no part of that stuff, man.
No. But I mean, I was like, what are you doing? I said, you're practicing real estate
Yeah, no,
without a license.
and I get people asking me all the time too. Well, would you buy this house? It's like, well, I'm not in the market for a house, man. I'm good, but you know,
Like I said, and earlier,
every house has an issue. Every house, I don't care,
right.
brand new. Every house,
Even new construction.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, every house has some issues and stuff, and they're not that big a deal. You just fix them and move on. I mean,
Right.
you know, you're not if you're looking for the perfect house.
Good luck.
You know, good luck, man. You might want to build it yourself or something. At least that's good enough for you. So I don't know,
Right.
but there's not one.
Then you got nobody to blame but you.
There's nothing. I mean, it's just always something. It's just always something.
Right.
But it's not a perfect world, you know.
Well, and like I said, I always just want to know, you know, I don't care if it's a laundry list. How much does that cost? You
Right.
know, because you can have one item that costs you 40 grand, or you can have 20 items that cost you $600.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, it doesn't matter. It's just, to me, it's all about the cost,
Right.
you know, and
Yeah, it's
you
cost
know,
of who's going to pay for it, all right? I mean,
right,
the market kind of dictates a lot of that because
right.
houses were flying off the shelf. Nobody,
You didn't get
you
nothing.
know,
You didn't even get an inspection.
I don't even need an inspection because they ain't going to get fixed anyway. So, you know,
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah, no,
But
that was a mess. It's
yeah.
still, you know, I haven't heard of any real lawsuits from that, but I'm curious to hear, you know, the lawsuits about that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if they don't disclose it, I mean, you know, that's a whole disclosure thing, right? I mean, as far as all that
Well,
goes.
no, yeah, that's between the buyer and the seller. I'm talking about brokers being sued,
Hmm.
you know, because if they didn't have the right disclosure signed, you know, the
Right.
broker between the broker and the buyer, like in Utah, there's a document called the buyer due diligence checklist. And so the buyer signs that and it lets them know that, you know, as agents, agents are specialized in marketing, not zoning and this and inspection, you know what I mean? All the different items. And that document, you know, in a court of law will really protect you.
Right.
You know, that
So what do you think about, let's talk about a little bit of testing for a minute. What do you think?
testing.
Like meth test.
Oh yeah, meth test. So
Test. So
yeah, talking to Ann Atkin, I did a podcast with her a few weeks ago. She's like, her motto is test every house every time.
yeah, I mean, and for me personally, when people ask me, well, which test would you do? I almost always pick a meth test.
Right.
I almost always pick a meth test. Because you don't know who's lived in there. I mean, I've done houses that you
Right.
swore would be positive and they're not, and then houses that were like they're a waste of money and it comes back positive. You just don't know. You don't know who's been in the house. You don't know
Right.
if the people who own it, you don't know if they're kids or their son-in-law,
Grandkid.
daughter-in-law. I mean, you just don't know. You know,
Right.
so and that because that's the most expensive on it because they're gonna rip everything out of that house, carpet, padding, all that
Right.
kind of stuff out of the
Any
house.
cloth.
Yep, anything that's cloth and your blinds, your curtains, all that stuff.
Yeah, because all the blinds have strings in them.
all your appliances are going out to the garage and they're going to get scrubbed and washed, and then they're going to wash all the walls and all the light fixtures and everything. Is like, man. And then you got to replace the carpet and padding. So yeah,
Right.
it's extremely expensive. And then you know, most meth tests, I don't know, you could test 3 areas, 3 different areas with one test. Most of the time, a test is going to run you. It depends on who you use, but $150, $200 somewhere in that neck of the woods.
Right.
It takes about 4 days for the lab to analyze it and give you the results. You know, Utah limit is 1.0.
Right.
So it
So
has to be
1.0
1.1
and down is just considered positive.
Right.
But
Right.
1.1 is considered.
They actually call it an inconclusive test if you've tested 3 areas, because they take that and they go divide it by 3. Now it's only 0.333. So you
Right.
have to have 1.1 in one area. One area only.
And,
So
and
if you come back,
there's no
so if
way
you
of
test
doing
3
that unless
areas,
you do 4 tests.
right. So unless you test 3 areas and it comes back at 4.0, then you know the house is going to be contaminated, no matter how they divide it up.
Right.
But if it comes back at 2, you're gonna have to do more testing to find out where it's at. And most of the time, the majority of the time, you're gonna find it in the ductwork. I mean, the
Right.
number one place we usually like to test is the ductwork, which is, we call the plenum. It's the ductwork going into the furnace right before it goes through the filter.
Right. So that one piece, yeah. So everything hits there because the return air is just pulling it in.
Yep. Yeah. Whether your return air, whether it's the furnace is running or the air conditioner is running, that return air is always working.
Right.
It's always sucking air.
Yeah, only for a short period of time. It's either not heat or not air.
Right. So now as far as radon goes, I think everybody should know the radon level. Now, we charge for those because we get the test in 48 hours. But you certainly can go down and get one at Home Depot or get one online and hang it off of a rope and the breathing area. And they're like, they used to be like $15, $20. I mean, now with the pandemic, who knows? It could be twice that. Who knows? And that pays for shipping. And you do what it says. You hang it there for 48 hours. You seal it up in a thing. You fill out the paperwork. You mail it to them, and they email you a report. So you don't have to pay somebody to do it. You can do it yourself if you want. We do. You get the results in 48 hours, and usually you're under a time frame. You're under your
because you're under contract. You got a deadline, right?
That's correct. Yep.
So radon, that's just a heavy air. I mean, it's just a gas, but it's
a gas coming up through the earth.
Right, but it's heavier than air, so it sinks to the bottom. In other words, it's not rising to the ceiling on the top floor.
No, it dissipates as it goes up. That's why you always want to test the lowest livable area.
Right.
That doesn't mean crawl spaces, but you can test it if you want to. But you're not breathing that air on a consistent basis. So, and know that radon's everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. So, I'm gonna see if I can find because the EPA, and this is recommendations from the EPA and the Surgeon General, anything over 4.0, they call it picocuries per liter is how they measure it. I'm trying to read right here real fast. It says that, they recommend anything over 4.0, they recommend fixing a house. Anything from 2.0 to 4.0, they suggest in the house. And I was going to see, they said the average indoor home is estimated to be 1.3. Roughly about 1.3 to 0.4 is what the average on the inside. Okay, so the 0.4 is what they're saying is on the national average on outside of a house. So it's everywhere, right? So it's 0.4. The average indoor is 1.3. Okay, so anything over 4.0 they put, and the mitigation system. I mean, last I heard about them, they're $1,600.
Right.
They cut a hole in your floor in the basement.
They drop a pipe in there.
Yep.
And then they run the pipe outside,
the pipe outside, or they'll run it up, put it to the attic, and they run that up and out over the eaves. And so the whole idea is you're drying the gas out from underneath the concrete and stripping it out of there. Okay.
Skipping the house, right?
Yeah, and then one more thing I want to mention on this is there's actually a website in Utah that's from the Utah Department of Environmental Quality. If you get on their website, Utah Department of Environmental Quality, and just search test results by zip code, you can punch in your zip code and it'll tell you how many tests have been done, how many high, what's the average, what's the highest one there've been, low, all that kind of stuff. So it's always a good little piece of information too, and that's right from the radon department at the Utah Department of Environmental Quality.
Right.
So
that's good stuff.
That's a good little tool to check out and everything too.
Yeah.
So, sure. Mold tests are a little bit more difficult because there's so many different types of mold.
Right. I mean, you got what I call shower mold, which is mildew.
Yeah.
Then you got black mold, which is toxic.
Well, yeah, that's the bad stuff. And a whole lot of stuff in between.
Right.
And again, pollen is considered mold. I mean, we do a test outside. Usually we'll do it's a mold comparison test. So they recommend doing one test on each level of the house and one outside, and they compare the two, and hopefully you have more mold outside than you have inside.
Yeah. Well, that's a
But
good
there's a lot of,
that's
but you got to remember, plants.
right.
The bark you put out in your yard, that your plants are going to put off a mold. So you're going to have molds
Right.
everywhere, which we actually pretty much, from what I understand, we have to have to live, I guess.
Right.
Microorganisms or whatever the heck they're called. But,
Part of the ecosystem. Yeah.
yeah. So, but so out of all the tests I do, that's probably the one I do the least.
Right.
Just usually when I do, it's because one, we found an issue somewhere, or maybe we found an issue in the house with water damage, or maybe in the seller's disclosures, they had a water issue somewhere that they did not claim an insurance claim on. If
Right.
claiming an insurance claim, more than likely it's done and done right, because they kind of got an open checkbook.
Right.
They can put blowers in there for a week at $20 a piece. They don't care. There's an open checkbook for them. So I don't worry as much about it when they file an insurance claim. You still check it out, but you're not as concerned when it's insurance claim, because those
Right.
guys they got all the money, whatever it takes.
Right.
Now, when the homeowners want to do it, then that might be, but they don't know what they're doing. It might be a little more.
Right.
But most of the time when I do a mold test, it's usually because somebody in the family has asthma, or they have some other respiratory type of an issue.
Right.
Or
you smell it. You walk in and smell mold,
Right.
You walk down the basement.
And again, all of these things are really about where your comfort level is.
Right. Well, it's just giving you information to make an informed decision.
Exactly. And some people, I've seen some big old cracks in the foundation and stuff. They're going like, yeah, that's no big deal. We can get that fixed. That's no big deal, And
yeah, I love those guys.
And other people, it's like, the light don't work? The light don't work?
Yeah, right. Where's my lawyer?
But what if it's not the bulb? It might be in the wiring. It might be starting a fire. So it's all about comfort level.
Right.
Just try to give them all the information. I don't tell anybody good house, bad. I think every house is a pretty good house, myself.
Right.
But it all boils down to not so much the age. It boils down to how well the house was taken care of.
Right.
Because things are going to go wrong. It's like your car. Things are going to go take it down to a mechanic. Don't let your son-in-law come over here and try to change the brakes or something if he's never worked on a car before. He's a computer guy. We're gonna have him change our brakes.
Right. He's watching a YouTube video. Yeah.
As he's trying to. Yeah. So just get it fixed and get it fixed right. If you're gonna get something fixed, if you don't know what you're doing, please hire a professional. Let them.
Well, and that's Utah's so many finished basements, but DIY or no permits.
Oh yeah.
I asked a guy one time. I said, "Did you get a permit for this basement?" He said, "My wife gave me permission."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can spot those usually right off. You can tell. Yeah. You can definitely tell when a general contractor or somebody's done it, or at least somebody that really knows what they're doing compared to somebody.
Right.
Especially in the mud work and the finish, the details.
Right. Well, and if the underneath work is done. I grew up in the painting business, and I always said that, we went in and painted everything. I'm like, look, it's, when I paint it, it's still going to be crooked. It's just going to be crooked another color,
Yeah.
So I'm not repairing the walls, I'll patch holes, but if the framing was done right, then it's easy to do the finish work.
Right.
I watch some of these carpenters sometimes, in these old buildings, and they'd start bisecting the angles of a corner and stuff like that, man. And they're like, because if it was just a straight 90, it would work. But,
right.
But they're putting edges on there, and it's 89 degrees here, and down here it's 91 degrees. How do you bisect that angle?
It's called mud and tape, buddy.
No, they were doing wood trim.
Drywall covers up bad framing, and mud and tape covers up bad drywall. And
yeah,
we all did the painters to make it look good.
Right. Yeah, that was we used to have a saying that little putty, little paint make carpenter what he ain't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you watch the process of how some of these houses, how the houses are built, there's nothing perfect. There's always little issues here and there.
No, it's the way it is.
You get a good builder and everything, it'll be fine. So
right.
Yeah.
So the testing, So the major issues you got to watch out for is water. You want to make sure water's away from the house, just to summarize, right?
Yep.
Electrical is double tap, very common, and the wrong size wire. So too thin of a wire, people buy the thinner wire because it's cheaper, but because the wire burns up before the breaker trips, so that could be a problem. So those are the two major.
If they're running their own electrical, if the electrical is already in the wall and it's already there, they usually just get the wrong breaker. Instead of running back down to Home Depot and getting the right one, they just put that one in.
Right. And then the testing, is your mold, meth, radon, and then just moisture. Yeah. Which is that the same as mold? No.
No. That little bit of mildew you get in your shower.
Yeah, that's not mold. It's just mildew.
It's just mildew, and it's almost in every house.
Right.
Literally. My recommendation is, clean the shower every once in a while. Wouldn't hurt.
Right. Yeah, right. Squirt a little bleach down there,
Yeah, a little scrubbing bubbles, whatever, man.
Well, and a good bead of caulk makes the water run away. Sometimes they put so much caulk in there. Well, now it's like holding water. It's like, yeah. Best thing to do is take a knife and cut all that out and just redo it.
Redo it right.
Get a nice little bead in there so the water moves away.
The difference between doing it right and wrong is about this much.
Yep.
Sometimes it's more effort to do it wrong.
Right.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it right. Watch YouTube. Watch your YouTube video. They'll tell you how to do it right. All those guys are experts.
Yep. Isn't that the truth? Hey, we're experts, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, well, this is awesome. This is a good conversation, Bill. Let me ask you this, Bill. So, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, my email is bill@saltlakehomeservices.com.
So Bill at saltlakehomeservices.com. Okay.
That's my email address.
Great.
My phone number is, I guess I give my phone number, right?
Sure.
Yeah, why not? All right. Telemarketers have it. Why not everybody else?
Yeah, right. Why not people that might actually give you business?
Potential spam. It's like, ugh. Anyway, it's my phone number is 801-680-7440.
Okay, so 801-680-7440, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Yep. So thanks for joining us. And thanks for being, what a great host you are. Guest you are. I'm the great host right now. So thanks for being, what a great guest you are,
Yeah, I try not to be too nervous. This stuff gives me anxiety, but it was a good conversation. I think maybe get people some information, and
that's the whole point.
It's all about trying to get you as much information so you can make your own decision, man.
Right. And that's all it is for a buyer, right? So, that's great. So, anyway, thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rob Aubrey. I am the host here of the podcast at Productive Agent and, the Productive Agent podcast. And so, Productive Agent is powered by Aubrey Home Loans. So obviously my shameless plug is, if you need anything with loans, you have any questions, just call me up, 801-999-8209. Again, 999-8209, or my email, rob@aubrey.net, rob@aubrey.net. And that's it. We're glad to take care of you. Thanks for coming. See you later, guys.
Been a pleasure. Thanks.